I'm here
Okay.
with Sharon Wegman. Thank you, Sharon, for joining us this afternoon.
Yep.
Back in November, we did a series on the subject of fear, and Sharon's coworker, Kate, joined us at CCC answering some of your questions. But we only got halfway through the questions, so we had some more. So I talked Sharon into jumping back in and walking through some more of your questions with us this afternoon. So to get us oriented, let's jump back into the very beginning question that Kate gave us some good perspective on. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Sharon. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between fear and anxiety? How would you define them, explain them, orient them together or separate?
Um, they can be very similar, but anxiety is usually not about fear. It's about another feeling or another topic that we're not talking about. So this would be very common in maybe a Pennsylvania Dutch German culture where you don't talk about anger or express anger. You don't talk about grief. You don't talk about other things that are of a more intimate nature. And so the second a thought tied to anger pops up in your head, it gets shifted into more of a body sensation where the body's trying to push it down through obsession and other things. So for most people, when they talk about their anxiety, it's really tied to something from their past. It's rarely tied to something in the present. Now they'll say, I have anxiety about this, but the
Yeah.
reality of it is very young, usually. I'll say that feels like a 6-year old fear, or, and then we'll talk about that more. And it's interesting, once we can name the other emotion, the anxiety goes away.
Mhm.
So I think the most common one would be like anger would be the most common one that is often replaced with anxiety. But it could be fear. I mean, it could be shame. And I could even have fear tied to anxiety because I'm not allowed to express fear, right? I shouldn't feel fearful. I shouldn't feel sad. I shouldn't feel anger. So then my body carries it instead of me carrying it as um, anger, shame, whatever. Does that make sense?
When the body carries it, is that then what gets the connection to fear? Okay.
Well, I mean, fear would be like I see a giant spider, like I have more of that kind of reaction, where
Um,
anxiety could last for a long, long
okay.
period of time until I'm able to calm the body down
Okay.
and name what's going on. And usually, like when we're in this office and we finally name it, it goes away. But we can't. So anxiety is more like the body holding on to what it cannot express, and fear is more about a specific instance. Now, a child could say be fearful about, have anxiety about going to school, right? Because am I going to make friends? Am I going to be okay? But again, those are questions not about fear at that school is scary. It is, how will people experience me? How will people see me? Will I be accepted? Those are all thoughts tied to like shame that get replaced and they become anxiety.
That's helpful to kind of orient between those two because I think they get lumped in the same bucket. And so to separate
Yes.
them and understand them differently is very helpful. So good.
Yes.
The second question is, how do I trust God when I fear people and what people can do to me?
Sure. And this is so common for people who have had bad authority figure experiences in their growing up years, whether in the church or just in their home. How do I trust people? Because the people I was supposed to bond with and have good attachment with in my earliest life really were not safe. And so, how do I even trust the ultimate authority? So, it's very common for people who've grown up in unsafe environments whether there was just neglect in how the parents parented, or there was actual abuse in how they engaged. How do I trust the God over everything? And so really what that comes down to is really working on healing our own attachment issues tied to our childhood, because once I can begin to name all the ways that I have self-protected, I will begin to recognize how that impacts my relationship with God. So I can't like take it away immediately, but I need to recognize that that comes from somewhere. And it's usually related to the people who were closest to us in our childhood.
So it sounds like I've got to walk into that and process that before I can wrestle with the fear of what people could do to me. So,
Right. So how do I trust God? I mean, if I already fear people, and yeah, I mean, it's dealing with the fear of people before I can deal with the God issues. So I often say to people, like, let's start with small things. What can we trust him on in small areas? Like so the small areas become what we do, but we need to recognize you're right, you got to deal with the people issue before sometimes you can actually engage with the God issue. They're always intersecting, all of
they
it.
are. They are. Yeah. We had a couple questions that came to us about the parenting dynamic and the fears in parenting. I think this next one falls into that category. How do I navigate my fear about the friends our children will make? Fear of exposure in their friend's household, things they might see or be aware of. So, fears about this unknown, about the kids' friends.
Sure. And obviously a very common fear for many parents. I can remember having those same concerns during my children's childhood. But I had to keep leaning into the idea that I was teaching them between right and wrong. I was
Mhm.
teaching them safe and unsafe behaviors. And part of them becoming strong and being able to separate from me is me letting them have their own experiences, which even as an adult, with adult children, that's still scary I would like to protect them from all painful experiences, but we know that's how we grow. So I always say to people, yes, it's going to be hard, but better get to know the friends' parents well, befriend yourself with those friends' parents, befriend yourself with their friends, have those friends in your homes. I used to be able to say I could tell which kids were going to turn out wrong just by knowing who their parents were, right? Because I could see their kind of parenting. So you really have to invest yourself in getting to know the parents and getting to know the children, so that it's not just you versus your child versus the world, but it's you and your child with, making decisions together.
I think
I
there's an
think you had,
element.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there's an element of this where there's a control component, right? There's a control
Yes,
component
yes.
that I have to release that, and with that comes fear, and as my kids have gotten older, even in their adult years, I hear stories of things that happened when they were younger that I didn't even know about. And so
Yes,
I did
yes.
my best to prepare them just like you and know the families and all. And I still hear stories. Oh, that's what happened over there. So we do the best we can. But at the end of the day,
Yes.
part of it is putting them in God's hands every day. And that's a big part of trust. So.
Yes, it is scary in the end if we have to keep releasing them into God's hands. And that might be scary. Again, going back to one of the original questions that we've already talked about, like, how confident am I in God? I might have to work on being healed in my own issues tied to authority figures so that I can release my children better, because it
Yeah.
becomes my issue.
Right, right. Not so much about them or their friend, but my issue. So,
Yes, yes.
this next question goes into a pretty specific area. It says, "How can I be afraid How can I not be afraid when there's information that is private about me in the hands of someone who intends to use that knowledge against me, or the person I care about with that info?
It's a very, very specific question. It is a very specific question. How can I not be afraid when there's information in the hands of someone whose goal is to hurt me or could hurt me?
It says who intends to use that knowledge against me. So it sounds purposeful. So
It sounds purposeful. I never know if it is purposeful, right? Because sometimes again, that lens of our attachment in our childhood is, if I learned that's how people handle things when I was a child, I'm going to assume that is what they will do. Um, right. I think it all comes down to, in the end, am I going to be okay? Have I worked on the idea that no matter what comes out, I'm okay? Can I be secure in self? So again, so much of our fears about what people know, about what they could use, come back to, do I feel secure in trusting that I'm going to be okay no matter what? Again, I have to work on that inside of me, as opposed to controlling what someone could do to me. It becomes more about working on my own security in self. And that's again based to whatever we might have experienced in childhood or in current relationships. And many times it's, what can I do with that fear? It is to really work on becoming secure in self and with God so that I don't struggle with that fear. Does that make sense?
Does. It does. I mean, the initial uncertainty and some panic, like maybe there's a panic, right? About what
Right.
could happen, right? I'm projecting into the future. That's just a normal part of reality and uncertainty that is
Right.
real, right? That's
Exactly.
normal. I think the question is when there's an awareness of, oh my goodness, what can happen? And then what's it doing to me? That's when the reflection that you're describing of, who am I trusting? Who's ultimately in control of my life, of this situation? And what does it look like for me to rest in that versus, get caught up in the ruminations, the paranoia, the anxieties that starts to stir around all those things. So,
Yeah, I had one of my adult children ask me a question the other day. I have the sun in my face. I keep backing up. Um, they were asking me like, what would happen if blankety blank and you stopped having your business? Something bad happened. And I was like, I'd do something else. I'd be happy, quite happy to do something else. I would be okay. I would not be destroyed. I would be, but what if they thought bad about you? I'm like, they can think whatever they want because my security is based on the fact that I am okay no matter what happens. And that becomes the issue that I've worked on in my life with God and with my own personal healing.
yeah. This next one's a little bit of a stretch. How does a person deal with fears that arise from overt and covert attacks from a demonic entity?
Oh, very specific. Um, so we're talking about more spiritual
Warfare
fear.
components, I think. Yes.
Right, exactly. And we've decided that it's definitely demonic as opposed to naming it as my own anxiety or whatever else. And I say to people, you probably have a history in which you've seen God come through for you, but somehow the overt and covert attacks make you perceive that evil is stronger. And as a result of that, that could be, as you might think that as a result of your own trauma. But I think, again, this comes back to the idea that I really have to work on recognizing that I'm already still alive. I've already done all the things, and that attack has not finished me. So I often tell people, then if you really need to, then you need to read Psalm 91 over you. You need to take specific scriptures and meditate on them. Or when people are very anxious with overt and covert demonic entity attacks, one thing that I often say is very helpful is to use um, some of the apps that are on the internet tied to just meditating in God's word, tied
Mhm.
to um, getting your body into a calmer space. Because I think, again, demonic overt and covert attacks, again, if you focus on that, you will give more power to it than it actually has.
Mhm.
Says
It's
the
a good word.
person who has dealt with very demonized individuals in the course of my walk through being a counselor. And the more I gave it place and fixated on it, the more power it had over me. And the more I chose to not focus on it and meditate on what is good, what is pleasant, what is of good rapport, the less power it had over me. So I'm
Mhm.
not saying that there is not evil that comes against us.
Right.
What I am saying is, to what level do I give it the place of power and meditation in my life?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing I would add to that, I think there's a component of facing those things alone versus
Yes.
in the company of others. I think there's significance in that, not being in that place alone. And I think there's also, in my own life and story, there's been a powerful recognition that the place that evil is defeated is at the cross. And so, reflections on the cross and who Christ is and what he's done, again, not focusing on the evil and the entity, but focus on the power of the cross. And that's where evil was defeated. And, the protection of the cross and the power of the cross and the blood of Christ. That's where the protection is. So those are two other components that I found in my own experience. Sharon is, for me with one or two other brothers, in those
Absolutely.
difficult places, and prayer that's focused around those things. So,
Yeah, I don't deal with anything that is actually evil by myself. Like literally, I would say, "Hey, guys, I need prayer for this," because I
yeah,
know one can put 1,000 to flight and two can put 10,000 to flight. So there's just so much power in agreement, in
yes,
prayer, in community,
yes.
that I trust myself to feel very confident that if I have other people praying with me, again, nothing will come to anything.
It's a spiritual battle for sure. So we fight those as spiritual warfare. Last one here, again, a very specific question. I think there's about five questions in this last one. My rational fears tell me that because I physically cannot control the outcome of the situation, something bad will happen. I can put my trust in God all day long, but the reality, His will be done, and perhaps God and I do not share the same fear. Is my faith compromised? Let's just stop there because there's a lot in there
There's
before we
so
move on to
much
the
in
rest
there.
of the questions. So,
Is your faith compromised because you have anxiety about what could happen? Absolutely not,
yeah.
right? I we just even think about the loss of control. That's just normal, and it's part of how life flows. And I think we can honor the fact that anyone would be fearful about that type of situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
Doesn't
they go
mean
on to
that you
say,
don't have
where is the anxiety? I'm feeling justified.
trust. I was thinking that that might be true if you believed that God didn't believe good things for you, right? Like if we believe that God is for us and that his power is for us and that he's a good daddy who wants good things for his children, as opposed to you perceive that it's okay that he would want
Yeah.
you to
Yes.
die, he would want you to die.
Right.
That's where it feels off, because I don't think that God wants people to die and their children to be harmed in the process. I do think we live in a fallen world, and so sometimes because we live in a fallen world, bad things happen to good people, and it has nothing to do with the person at all or God's will. Does that make sense?
It
We live in,
does. It does.
and
Yeah, I think
so
the
go
anxiety
ahead.
is, I mean, it's a reality, right? It's part of what comes
Yeah.
up in us. And the question is, what do I do when that happens? It doesn't diminish my faith, or it doesn't make it valid in one way or the other. So I would agree with you on that. It says, lastly, I'm fearful about dying in childbirth. I don't want to die, but I do want to run to Jesus when I do. I'm fearful about dying in childbirth. It's kind
Yeah,
of
I
tied to
mean,
fear of death. So, yes.
yeah, I think that the idea of I what I hear two different things there is I want to be faithful and still choose Jesus, but I don't want to die. I think these are
Both real.
valid
They're
and
real.
real, and I just there's some perception that I'm going to die in childbirth. That might be something that I would want someone to work with a counselor on specifically to address that neural pathway that believes bad things are going to happen to me and my child, and why. And goodness gracious, here we also have hormones that we're dealing with, right? As a woman, and the amount of hormones that are happening during that time to validate, of course, this is happening. This has nothing to do with faith. It just has to do with the sheer amount of hormone flow that's going through the body. And I don't think that means that you lack faith and that you don't love God, but I do think it might be helpful to process that with a counselor because it's a very specific fear that I would want you to get help on because I don't want you to walk through that alone.
No. I think there are times in our lives, or seasons in our lives where death is we have things to live for. Or, I
Yeah.
remember conversations with my grandparents, and they said, I love all of you, but all my friends are in heaven, and I would be okay if I was there with them. I would miss being with you,
Yes.
but I'd be okay being. So I
Sure.
think just different seasons of life we're oriented around that. We're oriented around those things differently. But yeah, to be able to get at what's underneath of that, and like this whole idea of how they navigate the bad. The bad is, there's something lack of faith or something wrong with bad. Well, bad is part of life. I mean, we live in a broken, um, fatally flawed, badly broken world, and because of sin. So, um, but I do think, like you said, getting some support while walking through that, because the last thing you want to do, you want to look forward to that experience of, the arrival of a child that God has hopefully blessed you with, not to dread and be fearful of that through the whole experience. So, but
Absolutely. And again, I just wonder how much hormones are playing into it and the obsessive thinking. And I'm not trying to dismiss that at all.
yeah.
But I just wonder with all the hormone flows, how that's impacting the obsession level.
Yeah.
So
Well, as we wrap up here, Sharon, any final thoughts that you have for us just on navigating this whole arena of fear and faith and the intersection of those two things?
sure, I just as the longer I'm alive and the more I look at the intersection between my faith and my beliefs from my past and the things I need to be healed of, the more I realize that He wants to be so much a part of my life. God wants to be so much a part of my life, but when I limit him based on the things that I've experienced in my childhood and put him through that filter, there's just not the level of provision that I would like to have as far as healing and whatever. And so I can't think of a single person I've ever met who doesn't benefit from going to therapy and understanding their story. And I know you guys do your wonderful group over there. What is Battle? What is it called?
For your
You do
heart
the,
is one of the experiences. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and talking about how story impacts our life and to have people who can witness that in loving, healing ways is so healing. Battle for the Heart, a great group for people who are just beginning the process of naming their story and how it's impacted their walk with God and their walk with other people and their fears. So important to be able to have safe people, whether it's a counselor or a group or someone you're discipling with, to be able to say, oh, that's a completely normal, natural fear. It's okay, right?
It's
Just
normal. Yeah. Yes.
so validating to have other people in our lives speak to it. And what I watch for a lot of people who have these very specific fears, they're not talking about it with other people. They're not
Good
processing it with
observation.
other people. And there's
Mhm.
not the validation like, oh my gosh, the hormone flow. Of course you're thinking that way. Like when you are able to hear it from somebody else, it
Mhm.
just changes everything. So I just know how much God has called us to be healed, but that's so tied to the community because if I only try and pick something up with my pinky, I'm
Yeah.
not going to be able to pick up what I need to pick up. But when I involve the whole body, my whole hand, oh, so
Mhm.
much I can carry. Right. And I think that's true with our own healing. We have to involve other people.
Yeah. It's a great word for us to finish. And, one of the things we're committed to at CCC is to live life in community because we think there's all kinds of things that God wants to do and transform in our lives, but we can't do it on our own. And we need Him and we need others for sure. So thank you, Sharon, for your time with us. If you've been watching this video and you want some additional support or direction towards either therapy, counseling, small group, make sure you reach out to our office at CCC office at cocalico.church. We would love to help you make those connections so that you can grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. Thanks very much.
Mm. Bye.